Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our weekly live conversation that we have every Tuesday at this same time and same place on streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and X. This is the weekly live podcast discussion for Transformation Ground Control. This is the weekly discussion that has everything to do with digital transformations and ERP implementations, a tech-agnostic view of the world of digital transformation and ERP. And I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But today's topic is an independent overview of leading ERP systems, which is always a fun conversation to have. It's always controversial. It's always action-packed. So we're really excited for this conversation today, especially excited for our guest, who I'll introduce here in just a moment. Before I do that, though, just a couple quick things. Love to hear where the audience is from today. So if you don't mind dropping in the chat, what city and country are you joining from? Always love to get a feel for where our global audience is joining us here today. Secondly, we are going to take audience questions here today. So as we go through this conversation of what are those leading ERP systems, how do they compare to one another? In which cases might some of these ERP systems be the best fit for your organization? Any questions you have, any comments you have along the way, please drop them in the chat. Love to hear your questions there. And then lastly, but not leastly, if that's a word, I don't know if that's a word, leastly. Last but not least, we are going to use this live interview as part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast. So if you don't watch that podcast, you can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com and see the podcast there. But this is a weekly podcast we produce each week. You'll see this episode that features this interview will be out in probably 3 weeks from now. But having said all that, again, audience questions, we're going to encourage questions along the way. But helping me unpack this conversation here today of the leading the independent overview of the leading ERP systems is Sam Gupta from ElevatIQ. Sam, thanks for being here again today.
Of course, anytime, Eric. It's always a pleasure joining you. Love your work, love your show.
Yeah, thank you. Love your work and your show too. And this is going to be a good collaboration. We tend to cross paths and have a lot of overlap in the work that you and I do and our companies do. Yeah. Before we jump in though into some of the discussion here, tell us a little bit about yourself and about ElevatIQ, if you don't mind.
Yeah, more than happy to provide quick overview. Eric and I have appeared on the previous shows as well. So guys, if you have not checked, please do check. Eric does a wonderful job with each of the shows. So just a little bit about myself, 20 years in the industry, ERP, digital transformation space, and now principal at ElevatIQ, which is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. Very similar focus as Third Stage Consulting. So that's about me, Eric. Eric, did we lose you? Eric. Hey guys, so I don't know, maybe you guys can, confirm in the audience if you're able to hear me, see me, if you want to comment and tell me if you're able to see me. I don't know whether I'm disconnected or Eric is disconnected here. Can you confirm anybody in the room? Okay, Eric, so Eric, you are back, okay.
Okay, sorry about that. That was strange. Sorry about that. I completely lost my connection here in a hotel room, so sorry about that.
It's always tricky with hotels.
Hopefully I didn't leave you hanging for too long. The good news and all that is I know you're a pro. You host your own podcast, so you're probably used to having to fumble your way.
That's right. I was not even sure whether they're able to see me or who's lost. Sometimes that's very hard to figure out. So I'm glad that you're back.
Yes, sorry about that. Well, thanks for that intro. Unfortunately, also I've heard your intro before, so even though I missed part of it, that's okay. I know you are. But thanks for that. Thanks for that intro. And hopefully we've got a more stable connection here now that I reconnected. So we'll try that again. So I guess before I jump in and start asking these questions, I'd love to hear in the chat from the audience here. And I see that a lot of you are already commenting on where you're joining from today. I see a lot of comments here that Eric is not here. So thanks for thanks for helping Sam out. In case you didn't know, now you know that I was not there. So thanks for your comments here today. And also thank you for dropping in the chat where you're joining from today. I'd also love to see in the chat, if you don't mind, as we get into the first couple questions here with Sam, love to hear your thoughts on what do you think if you had to pick one leading ERP system or a couple of them, what do you think they are? Not just in terms of market share, the big name brands, but just the systems you think have the most promise in the industry. I'd love to hear any comments you have in the chat. Certainly, as we get into this here today, I'd love to hear your comments about just some of these systems in general and some of the pros and cons. And our goal here today is really to unpack the pros and cons and sort of just a general comparison. And this is, you know how this is, Sam. It's always harder to do because we're talking in generalities here. If we were to dive down into mid-market, make to order manufacturing companies, we might come up with one list. And then if we went and looked at a financial services company, we probably have a totally different list. So it's really hard to have these conversations. But I think what we want to do here today is talk in sort of high level generalities and general comparisons of where these systems' strengths and weaknesses are. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, completely agree. And just to tee off, on the point that you mentioned, and I don't know whether people are aware or not, one of the posts that Eric did yesterday, it has probably 60, 70 comments. So you might want to pick some of those comments. And if you would like to discuss those, that could be a great opportunity as well, that we are happy to touch on those comments too.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, let's do this just to stimulate conversation here. And I'll pop this up for a little bit. I'll probably take it down and kind of go back and forth between showing this and minimizing it here on the screen. But I want to show you just what the post is that Sam is referring to. And, the minute we put this slide up, we're going to get some comments. Now, just to be clear, these are the top 10 systems. It says 2024. It's actually for 2025. So I apologize for that. This is an outdated graphic I pulled up here. In the midst of all our technical issues, I pulled up the wrong version, but this is the correct ranking here. It just says the wrong date. These are the independent ranking of systems that we've developed, here at Third Stage. So this is just our opinion based on our experience, based on criteria such as general breadth of functionality, cost, risk, potential ROI, the future state roadmap. And we also take some third-party factors into account as well. Although to be candid, we weight our own qualitative experience the heaviest, just from having helped so many different clients select and implement these different systems. So I'd love to hear knee-jerk reactions from the audience. First of all, anything that just looks good to you, that you agree with. Maybe there's things you just totally disagree with or that look off to you. Love to hear your comments here in the chat. But I guess, when you look at this, Sam, and you and I did not collaborate on this, and I know you guys put out your own series of top 10 lists. I'll be curious to see how it compares. But as you look at this, just publish the backup information for, what are some of your thoughts and takeaways? Anything that sort of jumps out at you is like, yeah, that looks right, or something else that doesn't look right to you or you wouldn't agree with necessarily?
Yeah, so I think, before we look at the list, let's talk about the purpose of the list. And I think, Eric, you did touch on this a little bit. And I know that we get a lot of pushback in general as the list publisher that, okay, why list? And some of these lists, they don't make much of a sense. And that could be partially true as well, to be completely honest, okay? Because what we are trying to do here is we are trying to compare the uncomparable, okay? That's what we are trying to do, but as a consultant, okay? And if you really want to facilitate the decision process, this is the process that you have to have as part of your selection engagement. Otherwise, the only thing you are going to get is the confusion and chaos, and which is the state of the ERP industry always, even today, even though the technology has come a long way. But so the purpose of list is slightly different. I know that it is always going to feel as if we are comparing apple to oranges. I get it, but that's the reality. Okay, these systems were not meant to be compared to begin with, but we are trying our best to sort of provide a snapshot view of the overarching industry and probably weed out some of the candidates which might not be as proven, as robust overall from the solution perspective. Now, Eric, touching back on your point related to the criteria, I mean, we have our own criteria as ElevatIQ. But I completely agree with you that even us, to be completely honest, okay? So you mentioned that you put a lot of weight heavily on the qualitative experience of your team. And that's exactly what we do as well, okay? At the end of the day, we are looking at what is making us successful, where we are running into challenges. We are listening to our customers, what challenges are they finding, and that's what our customers want. And that is the intent of the list, that, okay, we are trying to make these engagements as successful as possible. Now, overall, in terms of, obviously, there's a lot of work that goes in publishing these lists. So Eric, kudos to your team and the work that you guys are putting in. But I'll touch on, how we think about this. And Eric, I think we had done this last year as well, if I remember correctly, in the last episode. So there are some familiarity to this list. And I know that I think you guys have had some changes here. So overall, if I look at this list, I think the number one is still the same. I think Microsoft has been there on your list for a very long time, which is good. Okay, we like it a lot. Okay. Overall, I guess Acumatica is probably now, it was sort of there. Now it has come back, I guess, on the list. It wasn't there probably last year. I don't know if I'm right or not. Obviously, this is your list, so you know a lot more than I do, I guess. I don't want to overspeak here. Workday and Salesforce, they are very interesting as well. I think we touched briefly last year too on this particular topic. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on Infor as well as NetSuite. So overall, the way we think, and I think that's what a lot of folks on the post, when they were commenting that, hey, where is the industry? What is the size? Exactly. Tell us all of that. We need all of that. I get it. So that's exactly how you should be selecting an ERP system, and the way the list should be published. But the generalized list, they serve some purpose as well, in terms of, let's say, if a customer who just does not have any budget. I mean, obviously, if you have budget, then you should be hiring a very professional, credible company, just like either Third Stage or ElevatIQ, who are doing this on a daily basis. But let's say if you don't have budget, okay? So rather than doing this yourself or listening to the marketing noise, this could be a great tool, to look at, to at least weed out some of the candidates that might not be as relevant as prevalent, right? So that's the overarching purpose of the generalized list. So now coming back to our philosophy in terms of how we approach this. So we always look at the macro factors as well as micro factors. Okay. So macro factors are going to be overall from the corporate strategy perspective, where the R&D spend is, what are investors looking for, who is owning these software systems, and what is going to be the overarching direction of any of these vendors or the systems. And then you have the micro view as well, that is going to be slightly more features, functionality, the product centric view, where the products stand, overall. So I would say, in terms of our differences or the disagreements, Eric, I think you are probably more interested in that. So I'll touch on that. So I guess, one of the changes that I can see on your list is the Oracle NetSuite. Okay. Yeah. And Oracle NetSuite, I guess last year, I don't know whether you remember or not. What was the ranking last year? Do you remember by any chance?
I believe it was number 2. I believe it was 2 or 3. It was higher last year.
It was slightly higher, okay? And I think I'm going to agree with you there. So you are going to see that change on our list as well this year, which is not published. I'm not going to overcommit here. Obviously, there is a team that works, and, we are going to have all of these debates. Right. So obviously, I don't know what is going to come out of it, but that is probably going to be one of the changes that you are going to see on our list as well. And I'll tell you why.
Like what reasons would you bring it down up? I can tell you what mine are too, but what ours are too. But why would you see that dropping?
So one of the things that we are finding in our customer base, and I'll give you a little background overall from the cloud perspective, and that is a very important metric in terms of how customers should be looking at these systems, right? So when we were in on-prem, and I don't know, Eric, what is the percentage right now in your engagements, what you are seeing on-prem versus cloud? But cloud is very new. People don't know what they are getting into so far. I mean, that's our understanding. That's our impression. They just don't understand what kind of technical and financial risks that they are sitting on when they are opting for cloud, even though in 90-95% cases, we are also going to recommend that companies should be going for cloud because on-prem could be expensive. Okay. Right. But even after that, I mean, things such as your CrowdStrike was one of the incidents, right? So these are new learnings that we are going to get from the cloud perspective, and we don't know how much risk companies are sitting on. And one of the risks that we are noticing in our space, Eric, is the control of the spend from the licensing perspective. Okay. Yeah. And that's a major variable. So sure, these cloud systems are great. I mean, obviously your implementation is going to be cheaper, great sales pitch. Okay. But as soon as you go live, and what we are noticing in our engagement, Eric, is, okay, they quoted, let's say $100,000 for the licensing spend. Now, as the CFO, I'm looking at, okay, I'm planning for my TCO. We have this beautiful TCO chart, and we are crafting this, and I'm looking at, okay, my overarching cost is probably going to be $1 million or $1.5 million over the 5 years. And And as soon as I go live, I'm noticing differences. Okay, I'm getting these surprise bills. Now, why are we getting these surprise bills? And that's where the difference between cloud and on-prem is. And these are the real risks that we are noticing. And in our experience, Oracle NetSuite has one of the most expensive pricing, in general. And that comes as one of the most expensive software in general, and other software, their pricing is different, obviously. So overall, if you look at the cloud system, so that's probably our reason why we would not rank Oracle NetSuite as high, because customers are now complaining that we did not hear as much before. Now they are sort of understanding, how difficult this is for them, especially in the, the financial conditions or the economic, conditions we have right now. Every dollar is being watched. So this is a huge hit on their balance sheet and P&L. So that's our reason for Oracle NetSuite. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's not that the software has necessarily gotten worse or less functional, because it's actually one of the more mature SaaS and cloud products. And we're still talking about NetSuite here, by the way, just for those that might just be joining. But when we look at NetSuite, it's a great product. It's got a great market share. It's really well suited for, small to mid-market types of organizations in many cases. But I agree with you that the cost escalation that we see over time is significant, and it's a challenge. It's also a challenge for actually a lot of these systems, but I think NetSuite, we see it more with customers where, for the size of company they end up paying a lot of money for the software over time. And the other thing too that you sort of alluded to is on the implementation side. You talked about how a lot of times these smaller mid-market customers don't necessarily understand the cloud, or they don't have the digital maturity or sophistication that a larger company might have. So they don't necessarily understand what it's going to take to adapt to a cloud SaaS-based system that's got, predefined processes are a little bit harder to change. But also, I think on the side of NetSuite, the implementation itself, they've got this Suite Success approach where they're offering up or sort of suggesting to customers that they can implement it as little as 90 days using Suite Success, which is kind of an accelerated. But misleading too, because a lot of times most companies can't change that fast. They can't train their people fast enough, and they can't change their processes fast enough, even though the software itself can be implemented in 90 days or whatever the timeline is. So that's another challenge we see, is a lot of troubled implementations from that perspective. I also think that NetSuite's getting really aggressive in moving up market, and I think in some cases we see them getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves. Like they're selling into situations where they probably shouldn't be, and they're aggressively pursuing those. I don't know if any of that resonates with you too, but just to sort of add to what you're saying, those are some additional things we're saying that doesn't make it a bad product, doesn't mean it's going to drop out of the top 10 anytime soon, but it did kind of cause it to fall a little bit in our ranking because of that.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think, the reason why a lot of these vendors are pushing for the faster implementation, and that is probably the worst mistake that you can do, is because, obviously they are going to have far more control, overall in terms of their own revenue, and that's why they are looking to go faster. But again, from the change management perspective, if you look at, if you talk to the customers who have gone live, one of the things that they will suggest that, that is probably the worst mistake, because they were not trained, because it caused a lot of disruption. So that is something that you really don't want to do. You want to think through everything before going live, because once you are live, your problems are probably going to be 5x in my personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some interesting comments coming in on the different feeds here. So thank you for your chats here on YouTube. Bill says, I do agree with comparing the incomparable. Jason says, NetSuite is also a very mature cloud product relatively. I actually agree with that. Really good point. It is more mature than a lot of these systems you see in the top 10, because a lot of these systems that you see, including several of them that are ahead of NetSuite in the ranking, are actually still making that adjustment from on-premise to cloud. And in that transition, there's a lot of messiness a lot of times, like with Cloud Suite, for example. One of the things holding back Cloud Suite is... So
if I could touch on that comment, I want to make sure that we are being fair, because obviously as the independent consulting firm, our goal is going to be fair with everybody. That's what we are trying to do. So can we bring back that question, Eric, if that's possible? Yeah. So I guess, one thing, Jason, and agree, Eric, I'll completely agree with you guys, that NetSuite is definitely, a mature product, but maturity in terms of what? I think we need to define that. Okay. So are we talking about maturity in terms of the overarching operational capabilities? That's probably not mature with NetSuite. Okay. Ecosystem is probably mature. Okay. If you look at the global footprint, that is probably mature. Maybe mature in cloud nativeness. that could be a possibility. But operational capabilities, you are going to have a lot of challenges there. The strategy is very different of NetSuite product. It's designed to be slightly more generalized product. It's not designed to be specific product. So again, the product strategy is very different. So mature could mean a lot of different things. So I think there are layers to that comment, and just wanted to make sure that everybody's sort of on page with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. There's a lot of different dimensions of maturity that you've got to look at, not just product maturity, but the ecosystem, that sort of thing, operational maturity, as you mentioned. Also want to thank you to the people in the chat that dropped where you're joining from today. Charlene's joining from Virginia. Hello, Charlene. Bill from Atlanta, Georgia. Pedro from Zurich, Switzerland. Jonathan on LinkedIn joining from UK. Jason from Dallas, Texas. Adato from Brazil. Philip from Kent, UK. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate it. And Jordan from Dublin, Ireland. Thank you for being here today. Charlene thinks that Microsoft Suite should be number one. I think she posted this in the chat on YouTube before we even showed the slide, I believe. Maybe she saw it and then agreed. But either way, Charlene thinks that Microsoft should be number one. Do you recall by chance who you had at number one in your last general ranking, Sam? I know you've got all these different industry rankings as well, but just for the overall, do you remember who was number one?
Yeah, I think we have been ranking NetSuite as number one always, for last couple of years. That might change this year. Right. Number one spot is always the trickiest in our experience. Okay. Just because, we are looking for slightly more global footprint, because we don't want to put a product that is going to be slightly more specific in nature. And that's probably not fair to some of these specific products, to be completely honest, because they might be as good or maybe better in some geographies for certain industries, but they don't get the number one spot because the applicability is not as broad as somebody like, Microsoft and again, that's where I'm talking about comparing the incomparable, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And now what about, I'm going to hide this slide just for a minute. I'm going to come back to it though here in a second. So don't worry. We will have it up again. But when you look at, when you look at a lot of people watch might be or they're most tier one. Where do you see that feeling like?
Yeah, so Eric, you are really breaking it. And guys, if you guys, anybody in the audience, if you guys can hear what Eric is trying to say, if you can comment, I'll pick up on those comments. So that could be one possibility, Eric, but I'll try to pick up whatever you're trying to say. I know the internet is crazy.
Yeah. How about now? You hear me okay?
Much better. Go, please.
Okay, yeah, while
before we lose, yeah.
When you look at the tier one systems, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, where do you see that fitting the best, and what kinds of clients are most gravitating towards those bigger tier one systems?
Yeah, so generally, I guess, tier one argument is very interesting. And the way we like to think, Eric, is, and I'm pretty sure you are probably, thinking very similar. We generally don't like to think more from the tier perspective, tier one, tier two, tier three. In our experience, that is slightly misleading, because it's almost like, it creates the sense of class, I guess, and this is not meant to be a class. This is not meant to be that competition. It is not meant to be a popularity contest when it comes to the ERP selection. So in our experience, we don't really believe in tiers. What we really believe in the sizes of the companies, because the enterprise companies are going to have very, 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 very different need than the other segment. So let's say if people are thinking that, tier one means enterprise, if that is the case, then yes, for enterprises, for those three products that you mentioned, they are primarily relevant for the enterprises. They might not have as much relevance in the mid-market. And the reason for that is because implementing them is going to be very, 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 very expensive, because they are taking slightly more generalized platform, centric strategy. And then they are going to have a lot of layers of bloatedness, that is probably not going to be relevant for the mid-market companies. In general, the mid-market companies are looking for slightly more deeper operational capabilities, the kind of mid-market suites, the way they are designed, the way they are structured. So we don't necessarily believe in tiers. In our experience, that is slightly misleading. But overarchingly speaking, if you look at those three products, we go by the size that, okay, if you are enterprise, those are the products that you should be looking at. Mid-market products are not going to have the same scalability. Overall, if you look at this more from the M&A perspective, if you are very active there, then you want to get slightly more generalized product than pigeonholing yourself in a specific business model, specific business transactions. So our mindset is different. I don't know, Eric, if you have any sort of follow-up there on that.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that I do think the tier one categorization is becoming somewhat obsolete, and it's also less relevant than it used to be, because there are so many options that mid-market companies have that tier one sort of suggests that something is better or it's a gold standard versus something that's lesser. And you look at this list, and there's a lot of really strong contenders that are, that are not considered your traditional tier ones, like Odoo and Acumatica. A lot of companies haven't heard of those systems. I know Odoo always generates quite a bit of conversation. It's in our top 10 again this year. Here's a comment from Hassan on YouTube. Says Odoo looks staunch, non-English speaking European software with bugs or working as designed. Very difficult to US or really interesting. I had not heard that about Odoo before, but tell us what your thoughts are on maybe Odoo and open source, the open source model that they promote. Are you seeing Odoo often? What are some of your thoughts around that product in particular?
Yeah, so in my experience, I think Odoo always have had slightly more strategy problem, the identity problem, to be completely honest. Even though the open source movement is great, I don't know how that benefits the business, to be completely honest. Okay, so that's where I would stand. Overall, from the capabilities perspective, and I think Odoo has gone back and forth, and now they are sort of pushing their own channel and partners, and we have heard this from their ecosystem as well, that they are pushing a lot more for consulting. That you need to work with the consultant, you need to have consulting mindset. The technical expertise is great, but the consulting expertise is where the real play is with the ERP implementation in general. Now, if you look at the overarching strategy, the reason why Odoo is so popular, right? Because they are trying to attack the QuickBooks market, which is as attractive. I don't know why any company who's so successful in the consumerized market need to go after SAP-like market. Okay, everybody's looking for bigger deal size, but bigger deal size are also harder. Okay, so overall, from the corporate strategy perspective, I think there is a little bit misalignment, because every single ERP vendor is trying to go for those bigger deals because they are a little less problematic, I would say. They feel that you have a lot more money, but your sales cycle is going to be much longer as well. So I think they missed that point, right? So in my mind, I think Odoo is a great fit for that consumerized market. It's a better QuickBooks, and that market itself has a lot of potential. And I don't know why Odoo needs to be an ERP to begin with. Okay, that's where and that's why they have such higher valuation, because they are really trying to attack or disrupt that particular the accounting software market, and this is probably going to be a better. Now, overall, from the Odoo strategy perspective, to be completely honest, okay, so if you look at the product, the way they are designed, and I don't know, Eric, whether you have ever compared this with Zoho, because a lot of folks in the accounting community, especially, okay, they like to compare Odoo and Zoho because they look very similar overall, and I think that we have a comment.
Yeah, Samran on YouTube says, where do you rank Zoho? So you're back into his question.
Odoo, Zoho, ERP Next, I would say they probably travel on the same bus. They are riding the same bus always. I mean, they are probably participating in a very similar deals. So overall, I guess, Zoho is trying to attack CRM market, which is a very different market, compared to your ERP. Okay, CRM market is probably as big or even bigger right now, to be completely honest, which is much hotter, compared to your ERP market. And that's the discussion that we are going to have with your Salesforce and Workday that you have on your list, I guess. Right. Eric, I think I touched last, time as well. And depending upon the industry, that could be different, right? So overall, comparing this with Zoho, now the way, and again, if you look at the ERP is a consolidation strategy. It's a financial strategy. Not the consolidation strategy is not going to make sense for every company in the world. Okay, right. There is going to be a point in the company's life cycle when you require that consolidation strategy. If you don't have that, then you are going to run into real financial challenges in your company, and that's the fundamental reason why companies implement an ERP. But there is also a divide between two different industry segments. So there is a clear divide between ERP industries and non-ERP industries. Eric, if you go back to for example, financial services, banking, Okay, banking is going to have a $30 billion with a B IT spend.
Right.
Okay, and they are, I don't know, and maybe SAP's revenue right now is probably $30 billion. So that's the comparison that we are talking about. So these are very non-ERP industry. They had much bigger IT footprint. They were far bigger custom development shop in general. The way they operated, and ERP was like out of those 50,000 people that were sitting inside the bank, I guess 4 people cared about ERP. That's how limited scope of ERP was in those companies, because the only thing that mattered in those companies is just the financial reporting from the ERP perspective, as well as from the lenses. So in our experience, there's a clear divide. Now Odoo is somewhere in between, I guess. That's where the problem is of Odoo and Zoho. Zoho is trying to attack those markets. Zoho is not necessarily trying to attack ERP market, because from the database perspective, the moment you are going to join this together, the way ERP works, and that's what everybody hates about ERP, because it's so hard. But it is so hard for a reason, because you are trying to create that consolidation strategy. So now Odoo is sort of in between. Now, when you are going to be in between, you don't get the good of both. Okay, so that's my problem with Odoo. Okay, so sometimes, and they don't have the real advanced ERP features, and they claim that you can create anything. And creating anything, does that mean that you can create MRP? Seriously? If you are going to create that, do you understand that some of these companies have invested billions and billions of dollars in R&D to be able to create that? And now my developer, who's probably making $20 to $30 an hour, this guy is going to create an MRP. And so that's where my take is on Odoo. That Odoo is great, a great transactional system for companies who may be outgrowing, let's say, QuickBooks, and they are looking for slightly more, package structure. They don't have implementation budget to be able to implement either NetSuite, Acumatica, and 4 Epicor. That could be a point where Odoo might make sense. And Odoo has much bigger market to attack in that segment itself. They don't need to go for SAP-sized deals unless they change their strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's strengths to Odoo, and there's situations where it does work. I agree that it's the small companies. I know they are trying to move up to those enterprises. I totally agree with you. I don't think they're ready to move up to enterprise, but I do think it is a good modular alternative to, say, a NetSuite. It's a little bit more flexible, and it's got a little bit more of a modularity, or sort of a Lego building block feel to it, to where you don't have to bite off the whole thing. You can take little pieces of it and put it together as you grow and scale to a certain point. But once you become a mid-size or larger organization, I think that sort of moves you outside of the realm of where Odoo is strongest. Here's an interesting comment this is from Benla on YouTube. Benla says, do you take in consideration not just the ERP solution, or the ERP solution and ecosystem that is integrated to it? For example, Microsoft. And maybe let's talk about Microsoft for a second and its ecosystem. You talked about ecosystem a moment ago too, Sam. You talked about how maturity is not just the product, it's the ecosystem as well. That's one of the other dimensions, which is a great point. Totally agree. Microsoft has an extremely robust ecosystem. There's so much variability in the different types of VARs and the quality of resellers and implementation partners. They've sort of created this massive ecosystem that's grown organically and sort of morphed into a big thing. But in that process, they have Microsoft a lot less control over it. Like here in Oracle, they manage their ecosystem pretty tightly. They're not going to let a lot of garbage resellers into the system. They just won't let it happen. But Microsoft, I think it's a lot of variability. Have you seen that too, or what's your experience with the Microsoft ecosystem in particular been?
Yeah, so Microsoft is a very interesting case as well, and that's probably the reason why they ranked, in top 5, but they were never sort of number 1, to be completely honest, because we had our own concerns and we have had challenges because of that, to be completely honest, in the Microsoft ecosystem. And I would like to talk about one of the examples. And yesterday, when we were talking, chatting back and forth on these comments, and one of the comment that you mentioned, somebody was talking about, hey, you have Microsoft 365 on your post. Which product are we talking about? And then you mentioned FNO. Okay, and I have had a lot of pushback from the community that, hey, Sam Gupta, you don't even know what you are talking about. FNO is not a product anymore. Okay, Microsoft.
Right, exactly.
Microsoft does not sell FNO anymore, and it is true as well. Okay, so Microsoft also has had the real identity problems, to be completely honest. honest.
Yeah.
Okay, their real product packaging. Okay, where do they want to focus? Okay, their biggest threat right now, if you really think about it, okay, the real big fish that everybody's trying to fry is AI. That's where the money is, because that's where money is moving, right? So that's what Microsoft is really ahead in that. They have done commendable job in moving to AI. But is ERP a threat? They have bigger threat from your Salesforces of the world, from ServiceNows of the world, from some of these newer startups, Monday.com. I would say that is actually disrupting their core business model, because they are attacking newer business model. So do they really care for ERP? That's where my problem is with Microsoft, and that's been very, very, very visible in their product packaging as well. And sometimes these guys are really trying to change this more from the marketing positioning perspective rather than changing the core product strategy. So that's where there is a little disconnect between Microsoft. Okay, so if you look at the new name for Microsoft ERP, okay, they don't even use ERP word anymore, to be completely honest. So are they really into ERP market? I don't know. Okay, they have a name called, what is that? Finance and supply chain, I guess. And then they have something called project operations, and they are taking very similar strategy. The way you would bundle, let's say, Odoo or Zoho, very app strategy, but that is going against ERP. So now, are you an ERP company or not an ERP company? Because they have real competition from Salesforce, because they are trying to propose this whole best of breed model. So you need to have consolidation strategy if you are going to have ERP architecture. But again, the whole marketing play is making it difficult for everybody to have that identity problem, and that's what even Microsoft is struggling with right now. But I mean, overall, I guess they are really ahead in cloud, and they are doing really good. I would say, but my take on Microsoft is that they have real challenge. Okay, do they want to be a really, really strong CRM company? Do they want to be really strong ERP company? Or are they going after literally everything? Which is where my problem is with Microsoft.
Well, and then you've got, obviously you've got Office 365, which everyone knows Microsoft for that, but then you've got Power Platform and Power BI, and some of these other apps that they're building, and they are building sort of a pretty robust, suite of products. But to your point, it's starting to become sort of a puzzle to put together. How do you put this all together, and how do they tie together? Which I find interesting. What about I want to come back to a comment you mentioned. So in this ranking, we have Workday and Salesforce at number 7, and this is one that generates a lot of controversy. Odoo tends to generate a lot of controversy, both positive and negative. I mean, a lot of people say, yeah, Odoo is great. Odoo should be number 1. I think Odoo has more of a cult following than most software vendors. I'm not sure why that is, but whatever they're doing as a company is great for that. But I also get strongly negative comments when we publish Workday and or Salesforce in these top 10 ERP rankings, because a lot of people say that's not an ERP system. Workday is a financial management and HCM system. Salesforce is a CRM system. That's not ERP. They've recently announced this sort of tight partnership where they're going to market to offer both together. What, in my thought too, and our thought around this was that the Force platform offers third-party apps that sort of complement Salesforce along with Workday. So when maybe you have the Microsoft problem here, because now you're talking about a bunch of different systems, but in theory, it does create a complete ERP system. What are your thoughts on Workday and Salesforce? Do you think those are real ERP systems, or what do you say? Where do you put them in the market?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting discussion, right? So if you compare Salesforce's strategy versus Microsoft's, okay, Salesforce does not like to talk about ERP market at all. I mean, I've never seen them talking about ERP. They don't want to go after ERP market. Okay, everybody else wants to go after Salesforce market. Even companies like Infor, they were trying to actually, and Sage, they were trying to go after Salesforce's market, because Salesforce was becoming really big. And if you really look at the product, I mean, it literally have like maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 20 business objects. That's the extent of CRM, to be completely honest. Okay, it does not have anything. But what is the market valuation right now? Maybe $30 billion or maybe more. for Salesforce. So that's the kind of market that they have created. But Salesforce knew, they were creating a new market, completely new category. Okay, CRM is a very, 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 very different category. Microsoft was always there in the ERP market because they acquired ERP systems. Microsoft did not create these ERP. They acquired ERP. They learned, how ERP systems worked, and that's how they sort of got into the ERP market. So they are in the real ERP play. Salesforce was never into ERP play. What they like to champion is the platform strategy, because if you look at more from the enterprise software vendor, and Eric, if I were the enterprise software vendor or you were the enterprise software vendor, you want to create much bigger platform, much bigger ecosystem, and that's what creates the momentum, and that has always been the power of SAP, if you really think about it, right? But here, what Salesforce is trying to do, they are trying to, every single investor, whether you talk about private equity, Wall Street, what they want is real platform play, and that's what Salesforce is trying to do. They are trying to create platform play. They want to be sort of the back-end arm. They don't want to propose everything, because if you propose everything, then you are sort of competing with internal talent, employees. You are competing with consultants. So that's why they want to be just the tool. That has been their strategy. Now, if you look at Salesforce ecosystem, okay, there are 2 ERPs that are really prevalent. I don't know if they have third ERP. Maybe somebody created. Nobody knows about it. There could be a lot.
Right.
Okay. But for the most part, you just have Rootstock, which is slightly more manufacturing focused.
Like the manufacturing version. Yeah.
And then you have, Certinia, which is the new name for Financial Force, which is positioned more for the service industries, right? Yeah. But Rootstock has very limited exposure as well. Recently, we have seen a lot of momentum in the Rootstock ecosystem, because they have got really big investment now. Private equity is focusing on that. They have had really, really exciting executives there. So they are making some positive changes. We have had attention from companies like Deloitte. Obviously they are, moving the needle in the Rootstock ecosystem as well. So that's a big deal for Rootstock ecosystem. But overarchingly speaking, they don't have as many installations at this point of time. And they also have the positioning problem, because what they are trying to propose is the platform play. Okay. Platform play is supposed to be against the ERP pitch. Okay, ERP was never meant to be, platform play, because the whole idea of buying an ERP is that you are buying a package software, you are buying enterprise software, you don't want to customize much, you don't want to develop much, you are de-risking your IT implementation. That's the fundamental reason why you are buying ERP. But then platform play for ERP, it doesn't work. The data model was never designed for ERP centric installations, and that's why in our experience you will find Salesforce a lot very, very, very heavy customization in the service centric industries, because those service centric industries, they never sort of were consolidated to begin with. If you look at the core industries, banks, insurance, financial services, airlines, all of these non-ERP industries, they had very fragmented state, because that's how their business operated. They never had the consolidated state, and I don't know if that is going to change in the next 20 years, to be completely honest. Okay, because that's how their business operates. It's very, very, very different. They cannot afford to have what manufacturing companies can have, because they need to have that. They need the costing, they need cost tracking, they need the MRP, the traceability, the financial traceability, the financial control. So it's a very different perspective.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these vendors are struggling with how much to offer a standardized sort of a cookie cutter ERP system versus providing a set of tools that are a little bit more flexible and modular and open architecture, all that stuff. And I think that's where, you talk about Salesforce. Modularity, that sort of. I know I'm getting a bad connection here. Hopefully you can see and hear me okay here. But here's a comment from Jason. Jason says, Eric, you caught Oracle Cloud World last week. Any comments on Oracle Fusion AI product roadmap and strategy versus competitors in the top 10 list? I think, you mentioned AI a moment ago, Sam. All the vendors are investing heavily in AI. And I feel like AI is sort of a nuclear arms race within the ERP software space. And they're all investing heavily into it. And so I'm looking at other enablers of AI, not just the AI tools themselves, but what kind of, analytic tools and what kinds of, data migration and other types of tools are going to help enable some of that AI. And also, quite frankly, most of our clients struggle with so many other aspects of a digital transformation that AI is just further out on the roadmap for them. So to be quite candid, it's not, for us, it's not a high priority for our customers yet. But the vendors, of course, it is. They're doubling down on AI and cloud and all the stuff that's going to generate money for them in the long term. But what are your thoughts on the AI strategies with Oracle and or other vendors in general? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, overall, I guess, I mean, there is always going to be a conflict, to be completely honest, because you are dealing with two different conflicting, personas. Number one, you have to please Wall Street, your investors, and number two, you have to please your customers. Customers generate the real demand, but if you are going to not part of the bus, then you are probably going to be behind, right? So that's what investors want. But they also want profitability. So sometimes, I mean, their concerns, could be conflicting. The reason why every single enterprise software vendor, regardless of whether they are going to be private equity owned or they are going to be publicly owned, I mean, they all have to have some sort of AI flavors, to their strategy. Now, coming back to Oracle, okay, so let's talk about the history of Oracle, right? How Oracle has evolved overall, and that will sort of set the tone for where they want to go. So Oracle, overarchingly speaking, I mean, they were always a database company. They were never sort of the mainstream ERP vendor, but then there was a sense, and I don't know, Eric, you remember this or not. Every single infrastructure vendor, whether you talk about the IT stack, core infrastructure, or database vendors, they were like, okay, everything is controlled by these app vendors. We don't have any. I mean, we become more of the electricity, But now in the world of AI, it's different because now they are getting a lot more control. Overall, so infrastructure has become really hot. That will change again. In maybe 2030 or whatever. But in 2024, it's different. Okay, the only reason why Oracle wanted to get into ERP market is because ERPs create ecosystems, and those ecosystems are so powerful that they drive database purchase. That was the fundamental premise of, and that you can go back and listen to Larry Ellison's keynote speeches from past few years, and he has spoken about this that this is the only reason, and this has happened in last 20 years, I would say, that they have got into the ERP market. Right. But right now, even Oracle is struggling, right? Because they have actually missed the infrastructure bus because of the AWS, because Microsoft is so ahead right now. So Oracle is struggling as well, that now they have captured the ERP market, but now they are losing in the core business, that they really have to do. And that's why they have had a lot of changes in their strategy as well. So number one thing that they have done is they have refocused their strategy from your retail-centric spaces. They still have a lot of exposure to retail, but then they are going more towards healthcare. Okay, and why are they going more towards healthcare? Because healthcare drives data. It drives databases. Is healthcare an ERP industry? Probably not. Okay, so overarchingly speaking, I guess, if you look at the Oracle strategy, it is going to be fundamentally driven by what they have done with the latest acquisition, because Wall Street is demanding that. Okay, they paid a lot of price. It was very expensive. So what are they going to do with that? And that's what is going to drive their ERP strategy, their AI strategy as well, because that's what Wall Street wants. What customer wants may be different. Right. And how do you please both of these perspectives, I guess? I mean, that's where my take is on Oracle.
Yeah, it's true. And one thing that's fascinating at Cloud World last week was that they talked about, in fact, Larry Ellison in his keynote, he talked about this too, but they talk about this, I forgot what they call it, but it's basically you have AWS and you've got Azure, multiple cloud
vendors.
Yeah. So they're basically saying, hey, you're not locked into one cloud provider. You can sort of pick and choose. And I know SAP's been doing that too. They've been focusing on providing multiple cloud options, whether it's on AWS or another platform. So that was kind of interesting. I also think gathered, and what I picked up on at Cloud World last week was it seems like they're focusing more on not just the application, the Fusion application itself, but also providing kind of an architecture and a tool set to be able to integrate with other systems. So it seems like they're trying to provide that flexibility we've been talking about. They're not necessarily trying to be the sole single throat to choke, providing every application out there, sort of like a Microsoft or an SAP might. But instead, they're saying, well, we're going to provide a platform and a cloud infrastructure, and then you can do what you want with it as far as bolting on other systems or whatever. So it seems like that, they're sort of pushing in that direction as well. I totally agree with the healthcare comment too. They're pushing really hard in healthcare. Of course, AI, they're pushing the AI model just like every other vendor out there right now. What about, there's a couple comments coming in here from SAP. I'll just read a couple here in on SAP, or I'm sorry, can you say some words on S/4HANA, which is the SAP flagship cloud solution? Can you say some words on S/4HANA offering compared to ECC and expectations going forward? And before you answer that, Sam, I just have to comment here. You kind of shared this comment in response to Pedro. Jason on LinkedIn says, Pedro, in a few words, 2020, 25, 2027, 2030, which I think is a sort of a tongue-in-cheek poking fun at SAP's continuing shifting deadline for customers to get off of ECC. And then one more comment here from, oops, I don't want to block Jason. I almost just blocked him from the chat. I did not want to do that. Jason also says, on the technical side of things, database architecture was completely re-architected from ECC to S/4HANA, including in-memory database. How critical was this architecture transition for SAP? So a couple comments and questions coming up on SAP. I know I just rattled off a bunch of stuff to you, Sam, but what are your thoughts on S/4HANA? Like, what's the, how would you sort of assess the strategy and where it's the best fit for customers?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I mean, Eric, I think if I look at your list, our list, we were not as excited about SAP in general, I guess. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with that comment or not, just because they were slightly behind, I guess, overall from the cloud strategy perspective. But there have been changes. There have been some very exciting changes in the SAP portfolio. To be completely honest, after the whole CEO switchover, there was a little chaos, two CEOs. And then finally, we have some direction, I guess, right?
A few more departures there too. You just in the last few weeks. I mean, there's a chief revenue officer, and I forgot who else, chief marketing officer, maybe several of the executives have left recently. So that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. But sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah. No, I mean, overall, I guess, from the SAP's perspective, to be completely honest, I think the way they are moving, they have gone back to their core, what they were really good at, okay? Which is a very, 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 very exciting change, to be completely honest, okay? They were sort of confused in between, I guess, in that, I don't know, maybe it started in somewhere in 2013-ish, maybe until 2018, Bill was there, and he always wanted to attack Salesforce market, and that's why he's doing so good with ServiceNow right now, to be completely honest. But that was a different industry, different strategy altogether, and that's why he had acquired all of these products, that, okay, you need to have all of these products as part of the ERP strategy. ERP means everything, come on. That's what ERP always meant. But now with the new change, with the cloud architecture, okay, cloud is a very different mindset, the way cloud works. Traditionally, if you look at ECC, it was just one database, one product. You didn't need to have much of the architectural expertise. You can code the hell out of SAP and you can create whatever you want because everything was in your control. Not anymore. Not in cloud. Okay, not happening. So there are a lot of changes. Architectural changes. Okay, so now the biggest problem that ERP community has, especially if they are going to take very similar strategy as SAP, because Oracle is trying to do the same, Microsoft is trying to do the same, Infor is trying to catch up, even Epicor is trying to do the same. Can you believe this? If you look at their acquisition strategy, everybody is trying to push that, okay, I will give you everything. I will give you the whole enterprise architecture. Great idea, guys. Wonderful idea. Okay. But then you need to have a lot more with the enterprise architecture. Okay. So that's what SAP did. SAP acquired a company called LeanIX. Okay. They also acquired a company called WalkMe. Okay. These are very, 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 very interesting changes. Now we can, I mean, that's probably going to be a topic on another day. Eric, we can come back and we can talk about whether you should be getting a DAP system, from an ERP vendor, how much log that is going to create. Should you be getting something like LeanIX from ERP vendor? Again, how much control you are going to lose there? So we can talk on the other day. But overarchingly speaking, I think what SAP is doing, this is what most of the ERP vendors should be doing, because SAP is trying to retain its core market, which is the ERP market. No other vendors in the market is really worried about retaining the ERP market. They were never the core ERP vendors. SAP was the only vendor for which it was the bread and butter, and now they have gone back to their roots, and they are making some very, very, very interesting changes. And guys, if you are still on ECC, and you want to go to SAP S/4HANA, it's going to be a mind shift. It's a different architecture. It's a different product. It's not the same product. You require very different skill set. You require very different expertise. Okay. You require very different financial planning. You require very different project planning. Get ready for it. Okay. Don't attempt the way you have attempted your ERP products in the past, because cloud is very, very, very tricky. It's very risky. In next 20 years, Eric, you are going to be here. I'm going to be here. covering ERP industry, and we are going to see very interesting use cases like CrowdStrike. We don't know them yet. They are coming. Okay.
Yes.
Cloud is very risky. It's very expensive, and you have no idea what you are getting into.
Yeah, I think anytime I make that last comment you just said about cloud being risky and costly, I know I get a pretty strong reaction. So I'll be curious to see if the chat blows up here now that you called out the elephant in the room, which is cloud is good for investors, as you mentioned before. It's good for innovation. It's good for keeping up on the cutting edge of technology. There's a lot of strengths and ROI factors that go into cloud, but on the cost side, it's just going to cost you more. You talked about earlier about how NetSuite can get expensive over time. Microsoft, for example, they just are rolling out in October, the next month. They're rolling out, I think, anywhere from 11 to 18% increases to their annual subscription cost, depending on which module and the volume discounts you might have or whatever. Those are pretty material, significant increases, and I think that's where you're going to see the dark side of the cloud is here in 2, 3, 4, 5 years when companies look up and say, wait, hold on a minute. CFO starts to say, why are we were spending this much on our annual subscriptions. Now we're spending this much. Are we getting enough value for that? And I think at some point there's going to be a day of reckoning around a lot of these cloud systems, especially if they keep raising the cost the way some of them have been. Here's a comment from Frederick on YouTube. Frederick says, what a crossover, like Batman meets Iron Man. I don't know who's who. I don't know if you're Iron Man, if I'm Iron Man.
I'm going to have a bit clarification there. So this is, Eric as Tony Stark, and I'm just a junior Spider-Man here, okay?
So you must be Batman. So you're the Batman? Is that what he's saying?
No, you are.
So here's, I want to come back to this real quickly and talk about, we haven't talked about Epicor Kinetic. Epicor Kinetic's kind of right in the middle of our top 10 here, pretty high up in my opinion for what they are. I think they've been an interesting company that have been been on a bit of a roller coaster as a company. I think they're getting a lot of stability and legs underneath them now with their leadership team, and the private equity involvement seems to be stabilized. They had a lot of changing ownership over the years, and I think that cost them in the ecosystem and with their product development. But what are your thoughts on Epicor Kinetic? Where are you seeing that fit in the marketplace right now?
Yeah, so I guess Epicor is a very interesting product as well as a company as well, and I'm pretty sure you have tracked them for a very they have had a lot of challenges overall from the leadership perspective, from the private equity perspective. We all know late in the cloud. And if you look at one of the things that we like to pay attention to is their licensing strategy, pricing strategy. So at this point of time, if you look at Epicor, they still have very on-premise pricing. Okay, now are investors going to like that? That may be a question, because either that's going to change, or my doubts are going to be that, okay, is it cloud enough that they are not able to provide the cloudy pricing? So I don't know, how to basically comment on that. But overall, I guess they were very late in terms of cloud, in my personal experience. And right now, even today, they have very on-premise pricing structure. So in a lot of ways, if you are a customer and you are looking for a deal, that could be the vendor to go to because they are going to be much cheaper. But what you are going to get out of it is probably going to be a question. So you need to probably review a lot, I guess. So again, it's a very different strategy, very interesting mix, very interesting vendor as well.
Yeah, and to your point, we saw SAP, and we see SAP still struggling with that same thing. Just as another example, it's not just Epicor; it's also like SAP struggling with. They've got on-prem, they've got private cloud, and then they've got public cloud. And at first, that was it sounded like a great idea. You thought, oh, that's cool. Now you've got multiple deployment options, and Epicor is doing the same thing with multiple deployment options. But at some point, these vendors have to be more pragmatic and say, well, it doesn't make sense for us to have 2 or 3 different versions of our software. So let's get everyone over onto the same platform, which is the whole appeal and the scale of cloud. And so I think that's where Epicor will probably end up, just like SAP is sort of pushing that direction right now, and others have already pushed that direction. So it seems as though we're going to end up in at the very least, a private cloud, if not a public cloud focus for a lot of these vendors. But I think they're enticing a lot of customers, maybe easing the transition by saying, well, you can do on-prem or private cloud, in the short term at least. And I think they're doing that as a way to sort of get people over to the cloud. And over to their platform, and then they'll eventually have to move them over, I would think. What do you think?
Yeah, could not agree more. I think there are definitely going to be a lot of changes overall. Epicor, as I said, are they are making really interesting changes, and the new private equity they have now, we need to look at what direction they are going to set. For the most part, it does seem very consistent based on what they have done. It seems to be working. I think they have recently announced that they are also, as part of the whole $1 billion ARR club, I guess. I think they have that as well. But they also compete for professional services. So I don't know if they have a real 1 billion or,
Right.
but sometimes that could be tricky as well, right? Because, these numbers are not public.
Yes.
But it seems like they are heading in the right direction. They are growing. They are definitely making very interesting changes. And hopefully the private equity is not going to do the 180-degree shift to the product strategy. If that happens, that's always tricky for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Here's an interesting comment from Jason. I think you'll appreciate this comment, Sam, because I think this is something you've actually done, if I remember correctly. But Jason on LinkedIn says the top 10 list is loaded with great discussion, but when you boil the vendors, perhaps the more valuable top 10 list is focused on people, process versus technology at day's end. This may be your success differentiator. And you've done some top 10 lists yourself at ElevatIQ, right? Where you said these are the top 10 factors for what makes a project successful and that sort of thing. Is that true?
Yeah. So we are very intentional about separating these two. We like to separate the implementation from the product itself. When we have our list, we are really comparing product. It has to be the product attributes, the attributes that are relevant for products. Sometimes there could be overlap, but for the most part, we like to decouple that as much as possible. Just because you have a very good product does not mean that you are going to be successful. So that's why the implementation is going to have very different strategy. We have different lists for that. But great comment, Jason. I completely agree with what you are trying to say there.
Yeah, it's a good comment. Here's a comment back to your point earlier about the Microsoft community, but Urban on LinkedIn says, thanks, fun to listen in. Just a suggestion, check the logo type of at least the Dynamics 365. A couple of people commented on LinkedIn when I posted it too, that I have an outdated Microsoft D365 branding thing. And I think it's partially because of what you said earlier in the discussion, Sam, which is it's not just D365. It's a whole suite of products that extend beyond Dynamics. And I think that's what Urban's referring to there. But I found that there's two communities that you really don't want to mess with. I don't know what your thoughts are here. Being independent, you and I get a lot of praise, but we also get a lot of flack. Every vendor that's not number one is upset that they're not number one, and they all think they should be higher and whatever. Or we don't think highly enough of them in their opinions. And I feel like Microsoft and Odoo are the two communities where I feel like you just don't want to mess with them because you get so much blowback from that community, whether you're using the wrong logo or not praising them enough or whatever. I think those two, it seems like there's a lot more passion in the ecosystem, the people that are in that ecosystem.
So to be completely honest, I mean, in our case, we really don't care. We really don't care. We really like to go back to the fundamentals, what we really believe in. We publish the criteria. Sometimes we are going to be wrong. Sometimes we are going to be right. But we don't base our decision based on, yes, we will listen to the feedback, but we don't necessarily care for, who has what kind of following. Yes, that is going to be a variable in terms of measuring the ecosystem. That obviously you have larger ecosystems, so you are going to have much bigger impact. You are going to have a lot more add-ons, options for customers. So that's a factor. But we are not necessarily just basing, okay, you have 2 million people, but there are other variables as well. What's the size of those customers? So we look at everything.
Yeah, absolutely. What about here? One vendor we have not talked about is IFS. So IFS is number 8 on our list. It's another one that sometimes people say, well, why is that one in your top 10? Because IFS, of all of these vendors on here, it probably has one of the more industry and functionally focused solutions in terms of not trying to be everything to everyone. I'd say Epicor Kinetic is the other one. They're kind of focused a lot on manufacturing distribution. IFS is focused a lot on manufacturing, but they're focused more on asset intensive types of companies like aerospace and defense, field service based companies that like utilities and energy, construction, things like that. So they don't fit in a lot of cases, but when they do fit, they fit really well. What are your thoughts on IFS? I mean, just in general, as far as how you compare IFS to other systems in the market.
Yeah, so IFS is a very interesting candidate as well. And to be completely honest, I mean, the amount of pushback that we got, I think we got the most, on IFS. We very rarely get, on Microsoft, Odoo, the one that you
Right.
mentioning, but we got a lot more on IFS. Okay. And the reason why we got on IFS is because IFS is a very interesting character, right? One of the things, and Eric, I don't know whether you track the cloud top 100 list or not. You would notice that IFS is probably going to be in top 10 in cloud 100. Okay. You're not going to find any ERP vendors. Even the ones who claim that they are cloud native, you're never going to find NetSuite. You're never going to find Acumatica. Why is that? Okay. Because cloud overall, who's funding the whole cloud 100 list, and which are the investors? For the most part, it's going to be Salesforce. And Salesforce like companies who think in the whole SaaS best of breed sort of architecture, right? So that's where IFS really shines. So IFS is going to be really strong in the field service. Okay, IFS is very strong in the asset management. Now, asset management has a very interesting character as well. And Eric, I'm pretty sure you remember Info's journey. They sold their EAM product, and there is a reason. It was one of the most successful product under Info's portfolio. And we were shocked. Okay, why would he sell your most successful product? It doesn't make any sense. The reason for that is, to be completely honest, okay, if you look at the core EAM offering, number one, that is going to be very industry specific. Sometimes when you include industry specific product as part of your suite, you become very pigeonholed. Okay, that's number one. And number two factor is going to be that a lot of hardware vendors, okay, the reason Rockwell acquired Plex is because they wanted to sell more hardware. Right. So now this is their go-to-market strategy. So how do you compete with your customer? I don't know.
Right.
So that's where IFS is very, very, very interesting. Yes, a lot of companies are going to think that they are really good at manufacturing, whatever, but it's three different things, clubbed together. Obviously, they have a lot of revenue. There's no question there. But calling IFS as an ERP vendor is always tricky. Yes, they have a lot of footprint, but it's a very interesting, mix. It's a very different character, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other one I want to make sure we touch on a little bit. I think we talked about it a little bit in passing. Is on number 4 on our list is Infor Cloud Suite, and it wouldn't we can't really big. What are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, so honestly speaking, Infor is a very interesting character as well. And the roots of Infor is very similar to any other companies that were, created by financial geniuses, right? So you talk about companies like ECI, you talk about companies like Aptean, you talk about companies like Constellation Software. By the way, we should probably include Constellation Software now as part of the largest ERP vendor, because they are one of the hottest on Wall Street at this point of time. But would you call them ERP vendor? I'm not too sure.
Big question, yeah.
Right. So what Infor and Aptean, what they have done is they are trying to change things from the marketing perspective. Okay, they are really using marketing as a tool to be able to change this, and they have not made the same changes that we are seeing in the other portfolio from the product perspective. So when you say Infor Cloud Suite, it's a marketing bundle, to be completely honest. Okay, you have a lot more ERPs that are clubbed underneath. So we need to be specific, about an ERP, because that is what is going to dictate whether they are going to have, where they are going to sort of fit, what you are buying. If you're simply going to buy Cloud Suite, sometimes you don't even know which product you are buying, because if you look at the support model, you need to go to that product team to be able to get support. So Infor Cloud Suite is just a marketing play, to be completely honest. In our experience, it doesn't mean much. We have to have the right product there. And sometimes that could be confusing for the customers as well. For example, some of the vendors, let's say if you look at the marketing positioning of Acumatica versus Aptean. Okay, Acumatica calls them addition, but they are part of the same product, but Aptean has different products underneath.
Right.
So it is very misleading to call the same product, they're using the same term, so they're confusing the industry, I guess. It's not fair to the customers, to be completely honest. So that would be my take on.
It's a great point. And for anyone that's interested, if you scan this QR code on your screen right in front of you, you can pre-register to get our 2020 to 25 ERP report, which includes more explanation of these top 10 rankings, the criteria behind it. I'm also going to have a YouTube video that comes out, I believe, next week that I've already filmed it. It's just being edited and scheduled. But that YouTube video will cover in more detail this top 10 list, the explanation and rationale behind it, and love to hear your comments. But I'd love to hear in the comments here, in the chat, just what are your thoughts? What should be number one? And also what did we miss? There's dozens of pretty high profile ERP vendors that are not on this list. And when we see your list too, Sam, from ElevatIQ, There's going to be dozens of ERP vendors that are not included in your top 10 list. And we could all argue they probably should have been. And it's hard to come up with these lists, but you really have to take it all with a grain of salt. And I think these conversations are really healthy, and I love having them because you and I do the same thing every day. We're dealing with a lot of maybe similar clients, but you and I are in our teams, our respective teams are going to come up with different answers and different top 10 lists. And so I think these kinds of objective conversations are even more important than the actual rankings themselves, to be honest. I mean, I could make a strong argument. You could shuffle this list up randomly and put in random vendors, and I could make a pretty strong case for why that should be the top 10. And, there's so many objective and subjective things you've got to look at here. So, but download this if you want to see that top 10 list and you want the ERP report, just scan that QR code here in front of you. And I appreciate your time here today, Sam. I mean, this flew by and it was a lot of fun. And when your top 10 list from ElevatIQ, when that comes out, I'd love to have you back and maybe we have another conversation and compare lists and that sort of thing. And I know we're not too far out from the time when you're going to release yours. So that'll be exciting to see too.
Yeah, definitely very excited. I'm very open to it. This is the most fun part. I love working with you, love collaborating with you, Eric. Love your show.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love your show too, and the work you do. Thanks for being here. And in fact, I want to share this comment from Jason, who's been very active in this conversation here today. So thank you, Jason, for your feedback here today. But his most recent comment was, "I don't care what the vendors say. You guys rock. Thanks for bringing the expertise and thought leadership. I'm glad you appreciate it, Jason." Vendors usually appreciate it, but sometimes they get a little upset or their feelings get hurt when we don't give them enough praise or a high enough ranking in their opinion of where they should be. So hopefully this has been a good conversation here. James says the same thing on LinkedIn. Healthy discussion. Thanks, Eric and Sam. And thank you all for being here. Be sure to get the 2025 report. And Sam, thank you for being here. Really appreciate the conversation. I had a lot of fun here with you today.
Thank you so much, Eric.
All right. Well, audience, thanks for being here today. Great conversation. Appreciate it. Please share this, like it, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. That all helps the algorithm. It helps us get the information out to more people. So if you like it, comment and share it, all that good stuff, that helps the algorithm push it out on whatever platform you're listening or watching. You'll see this interview show up in the Transformation Ground Control podcast that comes out here in a few weeks. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes we've done of that show. We do this live podcast interview format every week to sort of produce the content for that podcast. So if you want to join live, you can do that every Tuesday, same time, same place. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and we will see you all